a lot of women that I see are heavily under eating because they're afraid of food. So I get their diaries back and they're eating less than 1,000 calories in a day. That's alarming. What I like to do is while I'm cooking my dinner or my lunch, I like to hum because this helps activate our vagus nerve. And our vagus nerve is the brain-gut connection, essentially. So if we can activate that before we eat, we're able to put ourselves out of fight or flight mode into rest and digest. And that is going to make a significant difference in how we digest our food. So there are a lot of ways that you can start to improve your bloat, but I highly encourage how you are eating is one that you should master because that is where digestion starts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wellness for Life. I'm your host, Niki Wolf, and today we're going to dive into a topic that so many of us struggle with, bloating and digestive discomfort. This is one of the main health concerns that I have struggled with for a long time. So I'm really excited to bring on our guest today, Karlee, a certified health coach who is dedicated to helping women eliminate bloat and digestive discomfort without feeling restricted or overwhelmed. And after battling her own gut issues for over 5 years, she has developed a unique approach to gut health that empowers women to take control of their well-being. She's also the host of the Beyond Bloated Podcast, where she shares practical advice, expert interviews, and personal insights to help her listeners live a bloat-free life. Thank you so much for being here, Karlee.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. No, I'm eager to dive into this. I think this is a very pressing conversation. I just finished kind of creating a whole magazine dedicated to gut health. And I think now more than ever, it's a very popular conversation because one, it's starting to surface, but so many of us struggle with this. And I know you have your own unique journey with gut health. So I'd love to just start by having you share a little bit about your background and what led you to get into health coaching.
Yes, absolutely. So as many health coaches do, we have an origin story. That's what I like to call it, my origin story. So basically, I'm going to try to short form it because it's very long, but I was very unhealthy growing up. So I didn't eat well. I didn't exercise. I drank a lot in university. My sleep was horrific, but I was never overweight. So even though I had these terrible habits, I guess I had a fast metabolism. So I wasn't aware of how unhealthy I was. So I kept doing all the things. And I did have symptoms early on, but they aren't symptoms that you would typically correlate to the gut. So I was chronically fatigued. I had chronic infections like urinary tract infections, throat infections that would come back multiple times in a year. So then I'm going and getting antibiotics multiple times in a year. I had canker sores all the time, which again, you wouldn't think is connected. But again, I wasn't overweight, so I just kept living my life. Through high school, through university, I was unhealthy, but my gut seemed fine. Then I graduated, got a full-time job, and I hated it. I hated my full-time job. I was miserable, and it was a struggle for me to get up and go to that job every day. And that was when my gut decided that's enough. I still had all my terrible habits on top of it, but I do think it was the mental load of it too. It all just compiled and I started experiencing extreme gut pain after eating. I was having explosive diarrhea. I was bloated all the time. And this was all happening inside my new tiny office washroom. So that was very uncomfortable. And I didn't know what was happening. I was not aware of gut health. I wasn't aware of health, really. I just was still very unhealthy. What I did know was my mom was gluten and dairy free. And we used to joke oh my God, if that happened to me, I would die. But I was you know what? Maybe this is happening to me. So I started by eliminating gluten and it didn't help. Then I eliminated dairy and it didn't help. But I didn't do the two together. And eventually I went to a doctor. I started asking what's happening to me? What's happening to my body? Why is this going on? And I was told, here's some gas medication. Take that forever and also get tested for celiac disease, which I did, and I was tested negative for that. So after getting no help from the medical doctor, I was like, I'm going to go see a naturopath, because my mom also had seen one of those and told me about it. I was like, okay, I need something because I don't know what to do. So I went and got food sensitivity testing done, and my test lit up like a Christmas tree. It was really bad. And my naturopath actually said to me, this is one of the worst ones I've ever seen. And I said, great, that's what you want to hear. She had me write like a food diary prior to our meeting. So I had listed all the foods that I typically ate, which were terrible. And she basically said, you need to stop eating all of this. So I had a mental breakdown because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to eat. I didn't know how to cook really at that time. So it was very traumatic, but I was like, you know what? I want to feel better. Like, I can't live like this. So I was like, I'll do what I got to do. And it was helpful that my mom was already gluten and dairy free. So there was like food in the house that I could start trying. And I did eliminate gluten and dairy. That was my initial step. And I did feel better. Like, the pain and emergency washroom visits were lessening, but I was still bloated all the time. I was still tired all the time. Like, I still had tons of other symptoms going on. So it wasn't like the answer. And so I kept going back to the naturopath and saying, okay, what's up? Like, I'm following this diet. What do I need to do? And I was given another restrictive diet, eliminate these things. And I was given supplements, take these 12 supplements at these different times. And I got to a place where I was very unhealthy because I was trying to be so healthy. I was afraid of food because I wanted my symptoms to go away. I was spending an insane amount of money on supplements because if they didn't work, I would just go to the next ones. And I spiraled into this for years. I was on my gut health journey for over 5 years. And I finally took a step back and I was like, what are you doing? You keep going through restrictive diets. You keep trying different supplements. They aren't working. And I will say, over the course of 5 years, like, I improved my habits as well. So like, I started exercising, I started sleeping better, but that was never my focus. But I would say over the last year or so, I've really zoned in on like my habits. Like, what am I doing in my everyday life? And I have stepped back from restrictive diets and supplements. I now eat the most variety of foods that I have in over 5 years. I take the least amount of supplements, and I feel the best that I have in my entire life. And so that is what led me to become a holistic health coach, because I was on this journey for over 5 years. I saw doctors, I saw holistic practitioners, and I was just pushed into this restrictive diet, supplement, protocol world. And that was my mindset. This is what I need to do to get better. And it wasn't what I needed to do. And so I became certified, and now I run my own practice helping women who are like I was. They have tried it all. They are trying to restrict too heavily. They've tried all the supplements and they don't feel well still, and they're looking for an answer. So that is Absolutely. My origin story.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think a lot of us who get into the health industry in some way or another have gone through their own, they have their origin story of, gone through the trials and errors and the frustrations and been able to come over the top and just want to help so many people. So I very much hear that. And it's so interesting. I remember just years ago thinking about this, that we have this misconception that if you are thin or not obese, that everything's good. And I think that's starting to change, but there's so much under the surface that can be going on. And I remember just growing up as a teen or even in college, okay, they're thin. They don't have to worry about anything. They can eat whatever. But the implications that can have long-term might almost be far greater, because if you're overweight, what you're putting in your body or what you're doing probably isn't the best for you. You're aware and conscious of that. Whereas if you're thin, and I would say a little bit younger, you're like, oh, I can eat this. I'm totally fine. I'm healthy, all that kind of stuff. And so I feel like, and I hope the way that the conversations are starting to happen, and there's some really powerful voices out in the industry now really trying to change the shape and the landscape of health within our country. I hope we can look at some of these other indicators like fatigue and skin and gut issues of, okay, let's focus on those, and not always the weight. I think weight is an indicator of your health, but let's look at all the things going on. And you mentioned, naturopath. I firmly believe in the power of naturopathic doctors. And these are doctors who look at the root cause of what's going on. It's a bigger landscape. And when I started working with naturopathic doctors, that's really where I discovered a lot of my diagnosis. But everybody has kind of a different story. Like for you, sometimes the elimination diets don't work. Sometimes they do support, but I've kind of seen that it's not always a long-term answer. I think eliminating processed foods and sugary foods and refined foods, absolutely, if you want to call that an elimination diet. I don't think that's what we're referring to. I think from what you're explaining and what is kind of known, elimination diets are more of removing even healthy foods, gluten and dairy and, FODMAPs and keto. These are real whole foods that we're eliminating from the diet. And so I'm just curious, based on your own experience and working with clients, what are your thoughts on elimination diets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for myself, I am currently still gluten and mostly dairy free. That is a bit of a personal choice at this point because I had a traumatic experience with gluten. So I am afraid to bring it back in, but I have recently been bringing in dairy. So I'm just prefacing with this to say that I do still have foods that I don't eat. But when I work with clients, it is very individual. So if you know for certain there are certain foods that are triggering your symptoms, then yes, I believe it is beneficial to eliminate those, at least for a certain period of time. But if those foods are like broccoli, cauliflower, different grains, apples, that is a big red flag that there is something going on inside of your gut. It is not the apple that is the enemy. A lot of people come to me and it's actually very sad because they say, everything is triggering me. I just want to know what is triggering me so I can eliminate it forever. And that is not, that is not necessary in the majority of cases, especially when it comes to healthy foods like fruits and vegetables and grains. So I do think elimination diets can be temporarily beneficial while we work on improving gut health, but they can often be brought back in. And I do not think, and I do not promote diets like low FODMAP because it is so vast. Like the amount of food in the low FODMAP diet that you are supposed to eliminate is insane. I did it myself and I lasted 3 weeks and I was miserable and I lost weight in that time period because you're eliminating a bunch of nutritious foods and it is highly, highly unlikely that you are going to react to every single high FODMAP food out there. There may be some. For myself, I was reacting to bananas and cauliflower at a time, period. I don't anymore. So those are high FODMAP foods. I did eliminate those, but I did not eliminate the entire category because it wasn't necessary. And that would have been adding stress to my already stressful life of my gut issues because try going out to dinner on the low FODMAP diet. It is a nightmare. And also I'm eliminating nutrients from my diet because high FODMAP foods are typically highly nutritious.
I'm curious because I did low FODMAP for 4 months. And so I might have like a slightly different belief. And I think this is important to bring all these up. Did your naturopath recommend a low FODMAP because you were, because they found out you had SIBO? Or was that just more of like, okay, try this out. Let's see if that does it?
Yes. So I actually discovered SIBO on my own. I saw naturopaths for years and no one brought it up to me. This is a sore spot for me. So I ended up doing my own research. I read books. I found out about SIBO. I got tested for SIBO. I tested positive. And so I did try the low FODMAP diet. And to be completely honest with you, it didn't help. I was still bloated every single day. And I did it for 3 weeks. Maybe if I did it longer, I would have seen improvements. I can't be certain. But I ended up coming off of it, and I now can eat all of the high FODMAP foods. Like I said, the only things I avoid right now are gluten and certain dairy products. So it was not necessary for me, in my case, to go low FODMAP.
Absolutely. And I think everybody's so individual. And I think a lot of these diets are a temporary thing. But one thing that I think that you mentioned that I firmly believe is, let's get back to the root cause of what's going on. What are the lifestyle contributors? What are the things going on that's creating this imbalance in the first place? And that's where you mentioned our gut health. So what approaches, when you're working with clients, how do you start suggesting like tweaks and fixes to improve their gut health?
Yeah, so my approach is extremely individualized. I actually have a 3-phase plan that we go through when I work with clients. So phase 1 is literally just awareness. So we track, first back up, we do a health intake. So I get all the information. Then we create a vision. So we decide, what do they really want for their life? Like, some people want to not be bloated because they want to be able to eat more foods. Some people want to be able to wear a tight dress to the wedding next year. Like, everyone has a different reason, and we need to get to the bottom of that. And then we create a 3-month goal or goals based on what they want. And it has to be something that we believe can be achieved in 3 months. And then we just observe. I have them track for 2 weeks, not just what they are eating, but how they are eating, when they are eating, the movement they are doing on a daily basis, their sleep schedule, their stress management, their levels, like everything we try to track without being overwhelming. You know, I ask them, what is a reasonable amount for you to track in this 2 weeks? And then we get together after the 2 weeks and we go through it and we decide where the gaps are and what we can start to do to improve these. So I do think supplements help. I think supplements helped me. I still take supplements. I don't start with supplements because I don't want the mindset of supplements are going to save me. So we start with lifestyle and dietary changes depending on the person. So a lot of women that I see are heavily under eating because they're afraid of food. So I get their diaries back and they're eating less than 1,000 calories in a day. That's alarming. And that is why they are tired and bloated all the time. Not probably the main reason, but it is definitely a reason. So, for example, someone like that, we would work on boosting the amount of calories they're eating in a day. If someone is saying, I'm hungry all the time, we look at their journal, we see you're eating 3 grams of protein at every meal, So we're going to set a goal to increase that. Some people sleep 5 hours a night. So we look into their sleep schedule and it's like, what can we do to start improving this? It's really, really individual, but my 4 pillars of health are nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress. So those are the 4 categories that I really hone in on. And we do add supplements later down the line if the client wants and we see they are necessary, but that is not my main focus.
Absolutely. And I think those pillars are so monumental. And it's, obviously I work for a supplement company. I believe in supplements, but they are designed to supplement what we're already doing. It's an additional, maybe you're not getting the nutrients from the food because the soil has changed, or your accessibility to these foods, or just your lifestyle doesn't allow you to be able to do something. So they are an additional support. And I'd love to dive into kind of supplement suggestions that you recommend with them in a little bit. But I think these 4 pieces are so crucial, and you really can't see the needle moved or expect the needle to move for your health if you are not focusing on those 4 main pillars. I mean, I have a 18-month-old and a baby on the way. And so sleep is a very common thing that we drop in priority because we have kids, this, that. But I'll tell you, I get 8.5 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. Granted, I have to my husband and I are in bed religiously at 8:30 p.m. That's not for everybody, but I know that sleep is so crucial for my health, and it's something that I can control. And, a lot of times, we could be sitting on the couch watching a movie or scrolling, but that's not going to support our health and our well-being and our goals. And so I think we have to look at, and to your point of like awareness, we have to start noticing, what are we doing? What are we incorporating? What are our habits? How are we eating? Just like you said, are we eating fast? Are we eating while we're driving? Are we chewing our food? All these different factors are so important. Now, I know you've said before that your approach to kind of health and wellness and reducing the bloating is about feeling empowered and not restricted. What would you say are your top strategies for reducing bloat that our listeners can start implementing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the non-restrictive part, as we mentioned, there may be some foods that a person knows for sure is causing them symptoms. In that scenario, yes, I think we need to remove that. But instead of removing, I say replace. So I have never in recent years felt restricted on my gluten and dairy-free diet because I know how to substitute all of it. And I eat pizza, I eat burgers, I eat cake, but I eat the healthier versions of these foods. So for anyone who is like, I need to avoid gluten, but I won't want to give up burgers, there's a way where you can get a sourdough, like a gluten-free sourdough bun, and you can get grass-fed beef, and you can get all the condiments. They're probably gluten-free for the most part. So we work on identifying their favorite foods, the foods they don't want to give up, and we manage how can we switch these into healthier versions so you don't have to feel restricted and sad, because it is sad, If someone says, don't eat pizza anymore, that's what I was told. I wasn't given alternatives. It was stop eating these foods. And I was very sad. So it is a priority for me. And I do recommend this for everyone. If you're trying to eat healthier, if you're trying to replace foods that are causing you issues, replace, don't restrict. And there are so many websites you can look up like healthier recipes for things. So that's one. Also, you kind of touched on it already, but how we eat is so important. And it's so often overlooked because it just seems silly. It seems like such a small thing that it's like, this isn't going to help. This isn't going to be the reason why I'm not bloated anymore. And it might not be the reason, but digestion starts at the top. It starts in the brain and it starts in the mouth. So your brain is signaling your body to get ready to digest. So if you are sitting and watching TV while you're eating, you are not focusing on your meal. You're more likely to eat really fast. You're more likely to overeat because you're not paying attention to your body's like fullness cues. So I always recommend to not eat with distractions. Do not eat in front of the TV. Do not eat in front of your laptop. Another reason for that is stress. If we are stressed, we cannot digest a single thing. And stress comes very easily these days. So if you're like working in a meeting while you're eating, that meeting could be stressing you out to the point where your body cannot digest. So I guess there's a lot going on here, but how we eat, eating without distractions, chewing your food to applesauce consistency, because as I said, digestion starts in the mouth. And if you are experiencing like bloating, gas, stomach pain, all of the stereotypical IBS symptoms, that is a very good indicator that your gut is not working optimally. So if you're sending down these massive chunks of food because you didn't chew it well enough, your body is going to struggle to digest that even more. So the least you can do is just really chew it to give your gut like a little help, because then by the time it gets down there, it's at least partially digested for it, and then it doesn't have to work as hard. So chew your food, don't eat with distractions, replace, don't restrict. And if you could do like a few deep breaths before you eat, or what I like to do is while I'm cooking my dinner or my lunch, I like to hum, because this helps activate our vagus nerve. And our vagus nerve is the brain-gut connection, essentially. So if we can activate that before we eat, we're able to put ourselves out of fight or flight mode into rest and digest. And that is going to make a significant difference in how we digest our food. So there are a lot of ways that you can start to improve your bloat, but I highly encourage how you are eating is one that you should master, because that is where digestion starts.
Absolutely. And I love that suggestion of humming while you're cooking your food. I mean, I feel like nowadays, and it's terrible, but I'm like, I can't even remember the last time I've cooked and not had a distraction or not played a YouTube video or something where, it's like getting back to the monotasking. But I love that implementation of, okay, maybe I'm not in the mood for the breathing, but can I hum? I think that's a fantastic suggestion. You mentioned, so we've talked a little bit about bloating. Now, I feel like bloating triggers can be very different for everyone, and it can really feel overwhelming, especially to your point of when you have this, I think they generalize it into a term of orthorexia, where it's this mentality of I'm so fearful, I'm eating so healthy, it's actually becoming unhealthy. That's where they use the term, whether you get diagnosed or not. It's just this obsession with eating super healthy. And that could be because you're fearful of experiencing the symptoms. And I feel like that's a really common concern. How would you be able to, talk to your clients or speak to our listeners about identifying their specific bloating triggers without those feelings of overwhelm and restriction?
Yeah, it is difficult, I'm not going to lie, to identify your triggers, because it can be so many different things. And what I do, like I said, with my clients in the first 2 weeks is we use an online tracking journal. So this is it comes with my program when I work with clients. And we don't just track food, because a lot of times people get very hyper-focused on the food. And yes, food is an obvious trigger for certain people, but there are so many other things that can trigger bloating outside of food. So if you have tracked your food and you're like, I still can't figure it out, it may not be the food. Things like doing HIIT exercise 7 days a week, that puts a lot of stress on an already stressed out body. That can cause bloating. For myself, I notice if I don't get a good, decent sleep, I'm way more likely to be bloated the next day. It just messes up my routine. So sleep is definitely something that can cause bloating, like lack of sleep or even good quality sleep. Stress is a huge one. Are you stressed? What is your level of stress on a day-to-day basis? And how do you manage that? Do you manage it? Do you just let it go and you just live that way? Do you have any sort of techniques? So I guess my point is, yes, you can track food. You can also track how you're eating, because as I mentioned in the previous question, how you're eating is playing a big role. So if you eat at the table and you take your time, you might not be bloated. But if you're sitting at your desk while typing an email, scarfing down your food, you might be bloated 20 minutes later. So these are all things that I ask my clients to pay attention to, because they all can be bloating triggers. And we need to get out of the mindset that it is just food. Food is the enemy. It's not. And it's everything that you're doing. And it took me a really long time to figure that out. So this is no shade to anybody out there. I took over 5 years to figure that out for myself. And that's why I am now so passionate about it, because I wish I knew earlier. Don't just focus in on food. It's everything. Did I answer your question?
No, you totally did. And I completely agree. I know, I used to be that 5 a.m. boot camp, going on an empty stomach, but having coffee before, probably not sleeping great, so much stress. I probably was doing keto and intermittent fasting at that point. It's your body is under so much stress. And it would be interesting to see some sort of a clinical study, if it doesn't exist already, and I don't know how you would regulate this. So this is kind of just an idea of, you have two different groups, and one who's eating the pizza and maybe more of the refined foods that generally aren't known to support a healthy gut, but they've been able to manage their stress levels. They get 8 hours of solid sleep a night. They're chewing, they're doing all the things versus somebody who's eating, the healthiest of diets and they're not working on those things. I would be really interested to see who has too many variables to be able to manage in there. But I think that just shows the power of all these other components. And that's why I believe holistic health is so important, is you have to approach it from so many angles: diet, lifestyle, supplementation. Let's get to the root cause. Our bodies work our organ systems work all together. And so it's so important that we're making sure we're including a variety of modalities to healing. And maybe that just starts with little implementations. If you're used to eating food with the TV on, maybe it's too difficult to have nothing. So you put music. Maybe you don't chew your food. Let's slow down. Like just making these small, minor changes. Perhaps you are a early morning boot camp person. Can you eat something before so you're not stressing your body out a little bit more? We don't have to go from this 0 to hero approach. It's just, how do we slowly start integrating these changes? And I love the examples that you mentioned. One thing that I'd love to touch upon, and we haven't really explored this in a previous conversation, but I just love to hear your approach and recommendations on supplements that you've taken that have helped move the needle, maybe that your clients have taken. What sort of ingredients have been supportive for them?
Yeah, so supplements are tricky because I find there are so many brands out there that are not good. There are a lot of clients that come to me who are like, oh, look, I'm taking a multivitamin, and I read it and it's like 5 grams of sugar per serving. And I'm like, oh, why is this sold? And it's not their fault, of course. Like, it's marketed to them as a health product and they think they're doing the right thing. And I commend them for taking that step and being like, I'm going to get a multivitamin. And it's just a shame that the majority of the options out there are terrible. So when I do recommend supplements, I am very selective on the brands that I use. I have a few brands that I'm in Canada too, so my selection is different than the States, but I have a few brands that I know in the back of my head, like they have great ingredients and they have a great track record for me and my clients. I trust them. So the brand matters and the quality matters big time. When it comes to the actual supplement, again, it depends on what the client is struggling with. So there are food supplements that I recommend as well as like pill supplements, if that makes sense. So things like bone broth, that is very healing to the gut and that contains collagen. So yes, you could buy a collagen supplement or you could drink bone broth. Probiotics are dependent on the person. I have a client right now who told me, I don't want to take probiotics. I've taken them in the past. They made me feel terrible and worse. I respect that. A lot of people with SIBO or dysbiosis, probiotics can make their symptoms worse because you're adding bacteria to an already overgrown bacteria situation. There are other probiotics, soil-based, that a person like that could potentially take, and they don't seem to have the same effect. But again, it's going to be very dependent on the person and their situation. I know for myself, when I was experiencing a lot of diarrhea, the probiotic that helped me was Saccharomyces boulardii. So like probiotics is such a wide range. There are so many different ones. There are so many different strains. There's different like quantity in the product, the ingredients. So it's very hard. Like I would never give a general recommendation of a supplement because it's going to be very individual to the person, what they want, what symptoms they're experiencing, what they've tried in the past. I'll give one more as an example, but leaky gut. Leaky gut is very, very common. And pretty much if you have gut issues, you have leaky gut. And for me and my clients, I typically recommend L-glutamine powder. So that's something that you can just toss in your morning lemon water, drink that up, and that helps strengthen the gut lining. So that's like sealing up that leakingness. So there are a few key supplements that I think can help the majority of people. But again, brand, quality, quantity, what the client wants is all a part of my decision making.
Great. I like that. And we do at LifeSeasons, we do sell Saccharomyces boulardii in a few different forms. So I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. And I completely agree with the L-glutamine. I think that's a very healing component for the gut. And I think leaky gut is incredibly common nowadays. I don't know if you've seen the documentary. I think it's Hack Your Health. And if you have not watched it, whether you, Karlee, or just anybody listening, it is so fantastic. It's filmed and produced in such an incredible, easy to understand way, and really opens your eyes to kind of talking about the elimination and what we need. We need that diversity. We need a mix of food from their nutrients to help heal and repair our gut. I'm curious too. So we've talked a little bit about certain foods that might kind of cause issues, and how for you, you've removed the dairy and the gluten. Are there certain foods that you've noticed with your clients or even yourself that have been really restorative for their gut?
Yes. So just mentioned one. Bone broth is a big one. I love bone broth. I don't know. Some people think it tastes bad, but maybe it's an acquired taste. There's also you can make it yourself. You can buy prepackaged powders that you can mix, or you can buy it prepackaged already made. So there's lots of varieties of bone broth out there with different flavors. So if you have tried bone broth and you're like, ooh, not for me, give it another go. Try a different brand, make it yourself, because bone broth is incredible. And I always recommend drinking it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. It also has 10 to 15 grams of protein per serving. So if you're struggling to hit your protein goals at breakfast, that's a fantastic way to get that in. So yeah, bone broth, definitely a big one. I would also say fermented foods, if you tolerate them. So people often think probiotics, I need a supplement. That is not the case. If you buy things like kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and you make sure you buy them from the refrigerator section, and they say raw, unpasteurized, because otherwise there are no probiotics in there. These are a great way to get probiotics. In 1 tablespoon of sauerkraut, there are billions of live organisms. So you do not necessarily need a supplement of probiotics. It's way cheaper and it's delicious. You can add it to salads, burgers, sandwiches. I put it on my pizza, but don't heat it up. I put it on afterwards. So yeah, fermented foods is a great way to get probiotics. And then eating a variety of plants. So like you said, the Hack Your Health documentary, there was another one on Netflix too, where they talk about the importance of diversifying your microbiome. And it's so true. They did a study and it showed people who eat 30 or more plants per week have way more diverse microbiomes than someone who doesn't. And having a diverse microbiome is going to help with your digestive symptoms. It's going to help with your immune system. It's going to help with your energy. It's going to help with everything. So if you can eat, and plants encompasses herbs too, and not just fruits and vegetables. So what I actually started doing with my boyfriend, every other week, we signed up for a produce box. So we get sent local in-season produce from organic farms in our area every other week. And it just has a bunch of random stuff that we would never buy. I got kohlrabi the other day and I picked it up and I said, what is this? I had never seen it before. And I Googled it and I said, how do I cook this? How do I eat it? And it's actually a really fun way to diversify your microbiome, because we get excited every other week. We're like, ooh, what's in the box? And then we're like, what is this? How are we going to eat it? And it becomes this fun challenge, and we're diversifying our microbiome. So it's really a win-win. And I'll leave it at that. Those are my 3 recommendations for foods.
I love that last suggestion so much. My husband and I, we're creatures of habit, and we can tend to get in the same routine of eating the same ingredients, the same food. And I'm trying to mix it up, but there's probably still plenty that I'm not going for. And my sister has a subscription to a box, and I just never thought about it in that perspective. So I think that's fantastic. And then you just learn, and then especially like raising kids, you're teaching them new fruits and new vegetables and how to cook them. I think that is a fantastic suggestion. Before wrapping up, is there anything that you feel compelled to share with our listeners that maybe we haven't covered today?
Yes. So I just want to give some words of encouragement, to be honest, because I was on my journey for over 5 years, and there were a lot of ups and mostly downs during that journey. And if I would have just given up and accepted, this is my life, this is how I live, I would have never got to the point where I'm at, where I can eat all these foods, I can go out for dinner, I can wear the jeans and the crop tops, and I wouldn't have become a health coach because I wouldn't have realized I can do this and I can help others do this. So no matter what you have tried in the past, no matter what your doctors have told you, this is not something you have to live with forever. It is absolutely something that can be improved. Your situation can be improved. And I encourage you to advocate for yourself. So whether that be finding a different doctor or a naturopath or working with a health coach, just don't accept that this is your situation and give yourself grace along the journey. Because as I said, my journey was up and down a lot. And the downs were very down sometimes, but we don't need to be so hard on ourselves because healing is not linear. It takes practice. It takes time. You cannot change the habits that you have had your entire life overnight. That is impossible. I've been on my journey for 6 years now. Like I'm at, my peak of it, but I'm still adding new habits. Like I've just started recently getting morning sunlight. That's not something I was doing before. So it takes time, it takes practice, and don't feel bad about not getting it perfect because the journey is about progress. It is not about perfection.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Where can listeners find more information about the work that you're doing and where you're at on social media so they can learn more?
Yes. So on social media, I'm mostly on Instagram at beyond.bloated, and that's where I share a bunch of different tips and information on bloating and gut health. And then my website, beyondbloated.com, is where I have more information about my coaching package.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your insight and some fantastic suggestions that I think I might start implementing as well. I hope our listeners gained as much valuable information as I have. So I just appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care.